Hey everyone, how are you? Good afternoon, good morning. Sorry, I unplugged myself while I was talking here. Anyway, hey, it's a pleasure to be back on with you all. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Barton Seaver. I am here with my lovely ladyfish wife, Carrie Ann, and we are coming to you live from the delicious, ragged coast of Maine and talking about two of Maine's very best seafoods today, scallops and lobster. So, from the outset, please do check in with any questions throughout. We're going to be doing a lot of different recipes today, talking about, well, two different species, and there's a lot to cover. But yeah, and generally just I want to say thank you to you because, well, food and feeding people is an act of love, and in these very unprecedented and challenging times, well, the world needs love. And to feed somebody is to care for them, to sustain them. To interact with your ingredients is to, well, identify with and connect with nature in many ways. So, yeah, food is so important to us all these days. So, to all of you who are here because you are working to feed your families, putting great food on the table, thank you. Well, I love you so much, as my shirt says. And, well, yeah. Couple other notes. If you hear some angry chickens outside, well, those are our girls. They're cooped up at the moment, so they don't get too rowdy during this. But also we have the windows and doors wide open here on our little beautiful part of Eden here on the coast of Maine. So you'll hear, I hope, lots of birds and the optimism of spring. Woke up a couple days ago and the pear tree, our ancient pear tree, had exploded in an ebullient profusion of blossoms. And well, hey, the ancient pear tree that has seen a whole lot and weathered a whole lot of storms feels really optimistic about 2020. So do I, and I hope that you do too. So with that, oh, one other note. Yeah, I'm wearing a hat today because, well, this is the original Maine state flag. Maine is celebrating its 200th anniversary here, so the bicentennial, and well, also I have COVID hair, so it sticks up so far that it literally doesn't fit into the screen right now, so I chose to wear a hat, and my wife is giving me funny eyes at this point, so.
Because you won't let me give you a haircut.
I won't let me give you a haircut, that's it. So anyway, here we go. I want to first off start off and say, just again, thank you for joining me, but also to thank you to so many friends and neighbors who helped supply some products for us today to be cooking with. Shucks, Maine Lobster. There's links to all of these there. So they've provided some delicious raw product, which I'll tell you all about, which is kind of a new innovation in lobster meat. As well as downeastdayboat.com, my great friend Togue Braun, who does an amazing job getting the very best of Maine scallops to you. Our friends at Seabest, who provided some warm water lobster tails as well today. And our friends at harborseafood.com, which is the greatest fish markets I've ever had access to. Here's some notes right here. What's that? Harbor Fish. Wow, I keep getting it wrong. Harbor Fish provides some great seafood that we've got for you today. So let's dive in. Let's start with scallops. Okay, so scallops, one of America's very favorite seafoods, oftentimes eaten in restaurants, and an absolutely very easy seafood to cook. So in front of me, I've got some Gulf of Maine scallops that are just absolutely gorgeous. To start off with, scallops are, well, they are sold by size. So when you see scallops sold as U-blank, U10s, U20, 30s, U40s, and above, that's the number for under blank per pound. So these are 10/20s, so there are 10 or 10 to 20 per pound, and they go all the way up to, well, mano de león, which means lion's paw in Spanish, which mean a lot of those come from Alaska and southern waters down through Chile, and those are absolutely giant scallops. You've also heard maybe of day boat scallops, and those are scallops that true day boat scallops are harvested by divers often. This was introduced first by Brown Trading Company here in Maine many decades ago. And the idea that, well, men and women would bravely don their wetsuits and dive into the frigid waters of the Gulf of Maine in February or March and April to catch these beautiful things one by hand. They're absolutely giant. But now dayboat has really lost a lot of its meaning in terms of the sizing, but it generally just educates around just that it's a big scallop. Just 2, 3, maybe 4 or so will make a hearty entree portion. However, dayboat often also now describes, well, literally the means by which they are caught on boats that go out for one day and come directly back to market, as opposed to boats that stay out at sea for multiple days. And the advantage there is, well, simply a couple of days of freshness, but, well, those days truly matter. And when you get a scallop that is really, truly fresh, like scallops that I have coming right off my dock about 30, 40 yards away from us, when you flick them, whoo, man, they literally tense up. Those muscles are still alive and just tense up to the pressure in reaction. And, well, that's a good sign. But what you want to look for in scallops is dry pack or untreated. Now, many of you might have seen scallops sitting in a pool of like a milky white liquid or so at retail, and those are totally fine. And they're a great product for what they are a great product for. But those have been treated with a chemical water retention agent, a sodium tripolyphosphate, which are totally benign in terms of their health impact. But what they do is they swell the scallop in terms of the moisture retention that it has. So when you go to sear the scallop in a pan, what ends up happening is, well, those swollen protein cells release that moisture first. And, well, the end of result is that you have to steam all that moisture off before you end up caramelizing it at all, and you don't get much caramelization. So what you want to look for is a firm, dry scallop. It looks tacky. It looks like it has slight sheen on it, slightly reflective, but it also has this sort of matte character, M-A-T-T-E, matte. When you touch them, they should stick to your finger like that for just a little while. I mean, that's really cool. That is a fresh and delicious scallop right there. So I'll be showing you a couple of different methods for scallops. One, just how to brown them in the pan. And then also I've got a really delicious dish, and I've shared with you the recipe for this, couple of PDFs for you in terms of downloads right on the bottom there. And this is like a sauté style scallop. And these are the same scallops I've got in front of me that have been marinated in peanut butter, soy sauce, aji mirin, which is a sweet rice cooking wine, rice wine vinegar, lots of fresh ginger, a little bit of garlic in there, and some soy sauce. And so I'm going to be throwing these under the broiler, but that idea of that sweet, savory peanut deliciousness on scallops with that meaty, sweet richness of them is really awesome. So I want to talk to you a couple of other species of scallops, and, well, the other one that really matters is the bay scallop. And these are going to be those teeny tiny little ones that you see. And true bay scallops are a very seasonal product, are a very high-end product, a lot of them coming out of Massachusetts. And they've got a very interesting fishery for them. You can read about it in one of my books, American Seafood, if you'd like, which is a compendium of recipes, well, not a recipe, I'm sorry, a compendium of the history of every single species of seafood that's landed here in the United States. But a really great sustainable fishery for them. Fisheries in the Gulf of Maine are also very sustainable for these for the larger sea scallops. But scallops are caught all over the world, and there's lots of different species of them, from the calico to the bay to the sea scallop. So look out for them at the market, wherever they are sold. Look for fresh and frozen products. Scallops freeze really well. There's a great company here in Maine called Bristol Seafoods that does a really wonderful job with frozen scallops as well as fresh. And I'm just calling out my neighbors and friends here because, well, they're wonderful people, and we're proud and pleased to live amongst them. So before I get into the cooking of scallops, I want to just make sure that you know that I am available here to take some questions. I'm just going to look down at my computer and take a couple questions, and then get into lobster here, which I also want to tell you about what we've got in front of us. And let me dive into that. So, Maine lobster, right? I mean, everybody loves Maine lobster. It's the greatest thing that comes from the ocean. That and scallops are our two most important fisheries here, providing a huge amount of income for my friends and neighbors all up and down the coast. So Maine lobster is available all season, in all seasons, but the vast majority of it is caught during the summer in near-shore waters, when the lobsters come inshore to mate and to molt. And to molt is when any crustacean sheds its shell in order to grow larger. So the shell doesn't grow larger with the body. What they do is they grow a new shell, and then they grow their body to fit into it. And so what you end up with is hard shell lobsters, which have been in their shell for a long time. And they are, well, their shells are rather hard. But as they shed their shell and grow a new one, what happens is that body is still small. And so all the muscles inside are still small. And so they take on added seawater. Hey, Carrie, would you mind closing that door?
Yeah.
Our chicken's making a lot of noise here. It's a beautiful sunny day, and we have the chickens cooped up, so please forgive us. So with new shell lobsters, or soft shell lobsters, as they used to be known, what happened was, well, the body, you just go ahead and close it. Thank you very much. They create a new shell, but then that body is still small, and so they take on added liquid, like seawater, that kind of fills out that shell, that mixes with their blood and other internal juices, and it fills out that shell. And the meat is tender and sweet, noticeably sweeter than that of a hard shell lobster, but the yield is a little bit lower. And so a lot of these, well, these are the ones that tend to be eaten here in Maine during the summer. A lot of them are processed in Nova Scotia as well. And you can tell a new shell lobster, and this is what's called a firm shell lobster. I couldn't quite get a new shell for you today because it's still a little bit early in the season for that. But what you can do is test right on the carapace here. And if you can push in a little bit, well, that means the lobster is newer to this shell than if it had been hard. So there's just some minor flavor differences there, but please understand, all lobster is absolutely delicious lobster. I'm not turning you away from any of it at any time. It's always delicious. But it can have different uses. And with these newer shell lobsters, when you break them open, there's sometimes a lot more liquid inside. And you can see some of that dripping out. That's some of that liquid that I told you about, that seawater and blood mixture that sort of fills that cavity a little bit. Please do not throw that water away. I've got a dish that I'm going to cook for you today. It's a Lobster Rossayat, which is a Spanish pasta dish that's cooked a little bit like a risotto and a little bit like a paella. So we're going to be doing that. So two other lobster products that we've got. These coming from my friends at Shucks Lobster from Maine, or Shucks Maine Lobster. This is a high-pressure processed lobster meat. So both lobster and crab, their meat sticks to the shell and is very hard, if not impossible, to get out in the raw stage, which is why you have to cook them in order to shuck the meat. But there is a high-pressure processing, which subjects the lobster to a very high pressure, or low pressure, I don't actually know. But what it does is it kills the lobster instantly and separates the meat from the shell, so that you have an entirely raw lobster meat separated. And this gives you such wonderful, well, versatility in terms of what to do. And it comes with tail, as well as claw and knuckle meat. And, well, we'll be talking about this as well. And then the last product that I want to show you is a warm water lobster tail. I've been talking about cold water seafood, but as I said, with scallops, they come from waters all over the world, including warm waters. Well, and so do lobsters. But the lobsters with the claws that are so iconic, well, there's also the warm water lobsters that don't have claws and come in the form of just the lobster tail. So sometimes these are called slipper lobsters, warm water lobsters, rock lobsters, etc. Various names, various different species, but oftentimes found in just the same form. Now, these came from my friends at Seabest. Now, this is a Brazilian product. There's also a Bahamian lobster product that's very sustainable. It's a Marine Stewardship Council certified product. But these are absolutely gorgeous. They don't have the same flavor as the Maine lobster do, but they have a wonderful, sweet, charismatic, slightly more nuanced flavor. And with these, man, slice them in half, throw them on the grill raw, and then flip them over, put some compound butter on top of them. Whew, man, absolutely delicious. Or, as I've done here, I've just used a, we got a lot of food in front of us here, excuse me. I've used a pair of scissors to just snip off the top of the shell here, and then pull the lobster meat out, which is possible with these warm water lobsters that have been frozen here. And then push the meat, slit the meat right down the top as well, and then push it back inside like that. And then I'll top that with a compound butter and throw that under the broiler. Okay, so we've got a few questions here, and I want to get to those as we start to heat up our pans here for all the various things that we are going to be doing. So, excuse me just for a minute. We got a lot of things we're going to do. This is exciting. Okay, so a question. Do you kill the lobster before boiling or steaming? Well, there's some controversy around this and argument. For me, no, I don't. Looking at the science and understanding from a humane perspective that lobsters do not have the nervous system that allows them to feel pain, what I do is I plunge the lobsters into a good amount of boiling water. I don't steam them. I just find that boiling results in a better flavor, but also it kills them quicker, I believe. And what I do always is I put them down face down first. And there's two reasons for this. The first is that I believe will kill them quicker, but also a live lobster that is quite vigorous is going to snap its tail in protest. And if you put it in tail first, that tail is going to snap upwards, and this is a big cup that will splash boiling water all over you. So head first, just one at a time, and it's important to let that water come back to a boil as quickly as possible. So, couple other questions. Thank you, Luke, for that question. M. Teresa L. Oh, is that Mother Teresa? I like it. I dig. If purchasing frozen lobster tails, what's the best way to cook them and for how long? They're costly, and I'm always afraid I will overcook them. Well then, you know what? Slice them and serve them as part of a pasta, something where you're going to have a little bit more sort of visual cue over the cooking process and exactly how they're responding to it. Slice them thin and toss it into the butter right before you put the cooked pasta and a little bit of that pasta water in there. That'll cook them through, but also carry their flavor throughout the dish, but also keep the meat lively, fresh, taut, with a good texture and without overcooking. So I'm going to shift that over to broil for something else that we're going to do. So another question, and then I'll get on to this. Curious, can scallops be breaded, deep fried? Basic breading techniques. Lynette. Hey, Lynette. So back to scallops. Absolutely. In fact, I was a little bit bored of scallops, I got to say, until my wife and I took a trip out to Block Island, Rhode Island, when we had out at a little beachfront shack there, some breaded fried scallops that utterly, my wife is shaking her head in disbelief at how good they were. That was 7 years ago. Just how amazing of a product they were. But simple, fresh scallops that are this taut in texture, that have that much stickiness to them, they're going to hold on to their breading really well. They also don't exude much, look at that, exude much moisture, so that breading will stay put. So absolutely, I do recommend that. And one thing you can do also is brine the scallops ahead of time, so that a little bit of that water-soluble protein comes out, and then you pat them dry really, really well in a towel with a good bit of pressure. And those water-soluble proteins that are pulled out in that process, well, they will get even tackier and help that breading to stay put. Okay, so I'm smelling my pans getting hot here, so I'm gonna dive over to this. Lady, would you mind, please, going mobile with the phone there? So the first thing I'm gonna do is sear up a couple of scallops. Now, I've got some butter that I'm gonna put in there. I'm gonna do that one in the back there. Turn down the heat and a little bit of oil. Yeah, I can't find the right oil, so I'm going to use a little bit of olive oil right there. So oil and butter mixture together. What that does is it raises the burn temperature just a little bit. So I'm going to season these just before searing. I'm going to put them in this pan that you can see is well, literally smoking hot. Now, one thing about scallops is they also have this elbow, which is part of the whole scallop, and I'll show you a picture here in a second of what a whole scallop looks like in a scallop catching video. But this elbow is just part of the connective tissue of the scallop. A lot of very fancy restaurants will remove that because it looks different, but to me that's just food waste. There's no reason to do it. Yes, it has a slightly different texture to it, but yeah, I'd rather just eat it and, I mean, why put it in the trash, right? So, as you can see here, I've got a very, very hot pan. And just put the scallops in, lightly season them ahead of time with the salt, and just let them sit. Turn the heat down to about medium here, and I'm going to smoke up the house because, well, I don't want the sound to get messed up. But you can see there's not a whole lot of oil there because what you want is that direct contact with the pan. So the only time I move them is because they tend to get a ring around the outside in terms of the color. So I'll move them just once in order to push down that center. Plus, it's the pan that has the heat in it, right? Not the scallop. So pushing the scallop to a different part of the pan is going to absorb more of that heat because when you put the scallop in, it automatically cools down the pan. So just moving them a little bit will give it a little bit more heat and a little bit more color to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I'll use this olive oil again. I've got another pretty smoking hot pan. And I am going to grab, these are those marinated scallops, the sauté. So I'm just going to use, just to spread the oil out a little bit. And again, same thing here. Just putting them down. I'm not going to move them. Now, all of the marinade, well, the marinade is all moisture, right? So it's important not to overload your pan here because all you're doing is creating steam. And then I'm going to immediately take the whole pan. Doesn't that look yummy? Carrie, can you comment on how good that smells?
Smells pretty good.
Okay, smells pretty good, she says.
I'll eat it.
She'll eat it. And I'll throw that in the toaster oven under high heat. And then we'll just let that sit. And throw that on your grill as well as an absolutely fabulous dish. So just flip these over, and I'm going to turn off the heat on these because they do not need any more. What you can see, if you can zoom in there, Karen, is that beautiful caramelization. And it's not just caramelization, but it's actually drying. You can see that there's a real crunchy texture to that. I mean, the mussel is split just a little bit. And as I said, I'm not going to apply any more heat to these. They're small enough so that the heat of the pan, that residual heat, is going to continue to cook them. And you don't need to caramelize two sides. Caramelizing happens only on super high, violent heat, right? Just cook one side. You're going to get all of the flavor you need out of that one side. Let them cook slowly the rest of the way through. And that way you're going to end up with this tender, moist, delicious, but still elastic, snappy bite that comes out of them. Another thing you can do with these is to butter baste them. And I don't recommend that for smaller scallops such as these. But what you do is you add some butter to the pan, let it brown. and then use a spoon. Maybe you throw a couple cloves of garlic in there, some thyme or rosemary, something with some heft to it, both in texture and flavor. And then you spoon that caramelizing butter over the top. And what it does is it deposits butter solids, which taste Milky Way, delicious, caramelized, awesome good. Plus that aroma of the butter and the garlic and the rosemary at the time, and deposit that on top. But that's really what you want in a scallop. And as you saw there, I just let it sit in that pan. It picked up a little bit of color, but that's mostly from just the butter itself. But I'm going to put that on a towel because it's really hot. White on white background there might be a little tough to see. Hey folks, live TV.
I'm gonna set this down and go take care of that.
My
you just talk right to that.
I'm just gonna keep talking to you right now because I did actually set off the smoke alarm. Sorry. Anyway, there you go. So my wife is very pregnant right now too, and I wasn't sure if that smoke alarm was within reach for her, so I was thinking I might have had to have taken an exit there. So I'm going to check in on my scallops over here. They are continuing to cook, and we'll flip those over. So I'm going to wait for Carrie Ann to get back before I get into any other dishes. So maybe she'll be back anytime soon. So I'll talk through the next dish that I'm going to do, and we're going to switch over to lobster here. And I've got about maybe 10 more minutes or so of showing you some dishes, and then I want to really dive into some questions. So what I've got is a bit of a mess all over the place today. Is a Lobster Rossayat. Now, Rossayat is a Catalan word, and again, this is a pasta which is similar to like a paella or a risotto. And so what I'm going to do here is start off the pan, and I've got a little bit hot already. I've got a nice pan with some decent thickness to it. So this is a copper. I'm very lucky to have copper pans here. Start that off. I throw a little bit of garlic in there, some onions. But as I said, my wife is pregnant, and these things are forbade in our house right now. So we'll just go with.
I heard that.
Well, I'm not telling secrets. It's just what it is, right? Okay. So I've got a little smoked sweet paprika here. This is from my good friends at Scordo, another neighbor, scordo.com, Skordo. They're a great spice company that blends their own here in Freeport, Maine, where we live. So again, just a shout out to friends and neighbors there. But smoked paprika is really wonderful. My wife is stepping on the tongs here. Hey, you got peanut butter on your feet there.
It's exciting.
That's exciting. Yep. So paprika is a really delicious ingredient, but it needs to be incorporated in oil. And the reason for that is that paprika and other capsicums, so all peppers, are oil soluble. Meaning if you put paprika just in water, well, it sits on top. It doesn't really do much, right? But if you put it in oil, it absorbs in, and all of that flavor is carried through the oil. So with that, I've added some toasted noodles. Now, these were noodles that I just toasted in the toaster oven. This is spaghetti that I just chunked up with my hands here and then tossed with olive oil and toasted. Now, be warned, if you try this at home, do not do anything else while you are trying to accomplish toasting the noodles because they burn like that. So just watch them. It might be a little boring, but watch them. And the result there is that you have this wonderful toasty, nutty, caramelized flavor to them. But as you'll see also in the final dish, that toasting of those flours and proteins adds such a wonderful texture. So I have blanched off some lobsters, and I'm using the lobster liquid from that, which I seasoned with salt, not too much in. And I'm just going to add that in and let it boil down. And this is where that sort of risotto type dish comes into play. All right. So I'm just going to let that simmer over here on high heat. I've also got some lobster juice, which I'm going to throw in. Again, this is another friend of ours, Bar Harbor Foods. They do a lot of really great canned soups and stuff. And they've got clam juice, lobster juice, which I really like to keep around because it's flavored steroids. Basically, you need some flavor in something, you dump a bottle of that in there. It's a cheap and efficient and, well, sustainable too, because you're using more of the animal way to get good flavor in. All right. So the next thing I'm going to show, I'll take a question or two here. I'm going to check in on those scallops back there, let that cook, and I'm going to show you how to break down a lobster. So let me check on the scallops, and I'll meet you back here on the cutting board in just a second. All right, where's that song? So the top of these scallops under the broiler has, well, it's done is it's cooked down the garlic and the ginger in there, so it's made it it's taken away that raw flavor, but it's really the texture and the temperature of that heated pan that really cooked them from the bottom side. If you threw that on a grill, I mean, absolutely gorgeous. But Carrie, I'll leave it to you, but
oh my goodness,
to get the focus on that. But check that out. How gorgeous that is, all that texture and beauty, that peanut butter and ginger and garlic, and whoo, man, that, my friend, is tasty food. All right, so I got a lot in front of me here. I'm going to clear out a little bit and show you how to shuck a lobster. So as I said, we have the new shell or softer shell lobsters here. Now, with a whole lobster, start like this, over a tray, because everything that falls out of lobster is, well, it's delicious in some way, shape, or form, and useful somewhere, so please don't throw it out. So what you do, twist just a little bit, and then leverage away from each other. So it's not a pulling, it is a leverage, so that you are cracking that shell. So the claws, same thing, leverage away from the shells. It's not a pull, it is a turn. So you end up with the knuckle meat, these two sections, the claw meat, and then the tail meat. And I tend to like newer shell lobsters because, well, I can use my hands on them a little bit better. And so what I do, and there are multiple ways of doing this, my wife has a really good way.
I have my opinions. I'm a Mainer.
My wife is from Maine. She has her opinions. Mainers are famous for opinions. And
lobster.
And lobster, yes. Opinions about lobster. There you go. So what I do is I put the top of the shell in my hand and just crack. Now I'm able to do that. I also have some pretty good calluses on my hands. Yeah, but then once that top shell is just cracked a little bit, I will then hold it like this, grab both sides of the shell and push out. And that just cracks that shell off, and then that meat is easily accessible right there. So, excuse me 1 second. I'm going to add a little bit of our lobster juice here.
May I make a point?
Carrie Ann, would you please make a point?
A lot of people at this point ask if you should wash your lobster meat off. There are some things on there you might not want to eat, but don't wash it off in water because you're washing away salt, seawater, and flavor. You just scrape off anything that doesn't work for you, but don't wash it.
This is very good point making. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
Yep, you got it.
We're a team here. So what my wife is telling you there, so don't wash it off, but there is on the inside. So what you can do is just pull back that top flap of meat on the tail. And on the inside, you're going to find a light green substance, and that's called the tamale.
In Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts. What's it called here?
The old lady.
Oh, in Massachusetts, it's called the old lady.
No, we call it the old lady.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I have my lexicons mixed up here, my common parlance all over the place. So that is very flavorful. It is delicious. Small quantities of it mixed in with a compound butter, say, and then drizzled over top of the final lobster dish. It's great. I will caution, though, however, that the tamale, or the old lady, is the hepatopancreas. You got that? Hepatopancreas. It will be on the test. And it is both the kidney and the liver of the animal. And lobsters are detrivores. They are perfectly safe to eat, but toxins can accumulate in that. So while it is delicious, I recommend eating small quantities of it, if at all. So you now have the meat. Any black tissue, there will be a black vein running down the line of the lobster. Well, that is the end of the digestive tract, and that should be removed at all times. So with the claws, and I see a question here, you left the rubber bands on the claws for cooking, with a question mark, as though that might be suggesting an opinion that Bobby L. has on whether or not she does it, he does it. Well, you know what? It's something I do because I have not found that it makes a difference in the flavor. And you know what? You're right. I did use that liquid into the lobster dish I'm making here. So you're absolutely right. You probably should remove them so you don't get any whatever in there. But yeah, you know, I've never
thought of that.
I've never really thought of that.
That's a good
before,
point.
Bobby, so good point on that. If you're just eating them whole and not going to be using the liquid, you know what? I do recommend keeping the bands on, simply put, because lobsters can hurt you bad. So might as well just take that variable out of the equation. And here's a little tip for those of you who ever engaged in live lobsters. If a lobster should catch hold of your hand, and this is the pincer claw and this is the crusher claw, grabbing, crushing. If a lobster does get a hold of your finger or larger appendage, then what you do is you grab the other claw and you hold it closed, because no animal wants to be defenseless. And so what it will do is it will open up this and release its grip over here. So that's the way to get out of a lobster situation. So I'm going to throw in under the broiler here, if I have a pan for it, I do, this lobster tail. And this is that warm lobster tail, and I've got a compound butter here of lime juice, tarragon, a little bit of not tarragon, cilantro, and a little bit of ginger. And I'm going to season that with salt. And I'm just going to throw that under the low broiler for 8 minutes or so. And then I'm going to take this dish, and we're getting a lot done over here. So these noodles are now cooking. They've absorbed the broth here. I'm going to throw in a little bit more broth. And then I'm going to put some of the shucked, the high pressure processing lobster meat on top. So I'm going to add some claw, some knuckles. I've got a couple of real treats here that I've done because I just happen to have the smoker going earlier. Just kick the fork across the...
You're going to need that.
I'm going to need that.
That's the correct way to take a tail out.
Because that's the correct way to take the tail out, she says. We're a little bit all over the place. Spring, optimism, enthusiasm. So I've got a smoked tail here, and this is that raw lobster meat as well. I'm just going to put that on top, drizzle with a little bit more olive oil, and I'm going to throw that in the larger oven here. And wait till that comes out. It's going to look like Don Johnson's haircut from a great episode of Miami Vice back in the 80s. It sticks straight up, becomes really cool, gets really textured. So, all right, so let's take a question here. What's the price of lobsters in Maine, Brenda? Hey, Brenda, thanks for joining us today. The price of lobsters today, when I went down to get these, was $5.99 a pound, which I got to say is a little too cheap. The labor and the effort that men and women on lobster boats put in is a lot. It takes a lot to catch a lobster. An incredibly sustainable fishery. For more information on that, please check out lobsterfrommaine.com to see a couple of videos about all of the different practices that we put in place here that are really fishermen driven to sustain their own fishery. But the amount of labor that goes into them is really quite a lot. Each lobster is hand harvested from a trap that needs to be hauled all the way up from the depths. So $5.99 is a really great price for the consumer, but given the current state of the restaurant industry and the demand is a lot lower because of COVID right now. So we'd really love to see those prices go up. But in the meantime, check out my friends at
Harborfish.
Harborfish.com.
I don't know if that's the website, but it is Harborfish in
Harbor
Portland,
Fish.
Maine.
They do direct sales and ship them all over the country. So please check them out. That's where I got mine. I also get mine from just the end of the street here at the Air Secret Lunch and Lobster. But we hope to see those prices go up as demand goes up because it's money that these men and women fishermen have earned. Thanks. Hey. All right, Julie P., what's the brand name of your toaster oven? Does it have a temperature gauge? Well, Julie, if you've been a part of these webinars before, as I believe you have, well, I use my toaster oven a whole lot. And the brand name, this is the Breville. And it looks like that. My wife did the research on this and found a really great one, and it served us very well. And yes, it does have a very accurate temperature gauge. The reason why I really like cooking with toaster ovens is because it's a very small box that heats up very easily because it's not this large space with a lot of thick metal, on the outside needs to warm up. So it less energy to get to heat, get to temp. But also what's great about it is that if you open the door at 350 degrees and drop some lobster in there or something, and the temperature drops to 330, it doesn't take much energy to get it back up to temperature. And so you don't end up with these swings of temperature, a very even controlled heat. That's why I really love cooking with the toaster oven. Just going to move that between the two heat units there. So let's take another question. So, hey, thanks, Julie. I appreciate your question. I agree. Oh, a comment from Brenda. I agree. Same price or lower in Nova Scotia. Yeah, well, I keep talking about Maine lobster, but Maritime Province Canadian lobster is also absolutely delicious as well. Brenda, I hope all the best for you and your community. And we can support them by keeping buying lobster. So dig in, eat it up. All right, from Shruti. How do you prep scallops before cooking them? Well, it depends, Shruti, on what you're going to do with them, what your desired outcome is. Do you want a hard sear crust on them like that? In that case, don't do much to them at all except season them with salt directly before cooking them. If you're going to smoke them or grill them, you can brine them ahead of time. A mixture of 3 parts salt, 1 part sugar, to water to your taste, and just let them sit in there, and that will help tense up that flesh a little bit, add some texture, add some flavor if you'd like to. Throw some coriander seeds in there, some toasted ground fennel seeds. That flavor will absorb in, and then throw that on the barbecue or the grill. Absolutely delicious. But generally keep water away from them at all times. There's no need to wash a scallop. You want to look over them for any bits of fragments of shell, but those are very rare. There's no need to remove that elbow, which is that piece on the side that I was speaking of. It's just as delicious as the rest of it. And if you're going to be eating them raw, find some really great quality scallops that came to you very fresh out of the water. They should be very tacky, very fresh smelling, smell like a little bit like watermelons or violets, strong cucumber scent to them. Dice it up, and I've provided for you a recipe for ceviche here. And I like to let scallops marinate for, up to about an hour. You don't want to overdo them. But when I do ceviche, oftentimes ceviche is diced, which I don't think is the best texture for scallops. So what I like to do with them is slice them. And if you'll see here, if you can see down on the cutting board, what I'll use is a larger knife.
Little trouble there.
A larger knife. And I'll start at the tip, and I'll just push straight on through. So 1 slice. So you're not sawing back and forth, and then you end up with that gorgeous texture, solid all the way through. So again, with that.
And
No. Wind just pushed a door closed here. I'm wondering if it was our 3-year-old. So you end up with that gorgeous texture. And what you end up also with there is such a great plate presence. There's so much charisma and presence on that plate. So I'll throw that back over here. I'm going to check in on 2 of our recipes, start in on the last recipe we're going to do, and then take a few more questions. So let's see. Why do you move from the stove to the toaster oven from Star? Well, the reason for that is because the heat that comes off of a stove, well, it's very high. It's quite violent. And not always do you want to retain just that high heat throughout the whole cooking process. So oftentimes I'll move it over to the toaster oven so that, well, you create this ambient temperature environment where the heat is gentler. In the case of those scallops that I was cooking with the peanut marinade, that pan retains so much of that heat and really does that caramelization work for you, while the oven cooks them gently through on the other side. So you end up with, well, everything you want out of the scallop. All right, I'm going to check this out here, and it is just 2 minutes out or so. All right. Last dish I want to talk about is, well, we often think about lobster just in terms of, well, serve it with butter straight out of the shell. We'll talk to you how to break down. I didn't tell you how to break down the claws. We will get to that in a second. But it's a really great charismatic dish when served cold. And I'm going to do a very simple, quick dish for you here. And that is, well, lobster is a really great summer ingredient. So I've got some other great summer ingredients, and that is squash and zucchini. And I'm going to slice this very thin. And I'm going to make a carpaccio out of these. Lay it out on a plate, and then use the lobster as a garnish for this. So you can get really fancy with this and do, a scalloped layer where it's perfectly sized and alternating green, yellow, which if you're a fancy, happy chef that has the time and labor to do all of this, then that's great. But you know what? Pull it off your cutting board as you see fit. And, well, we're making food for our families, not necessarily just for Pinterest. So, make it look as good as you want it to look. There's a lot to do here. So that's just a simple carpaccio of raw squash and zucchini. I will season that just a little bit with some kosher salt here. And I'll take these cooked lobster tails that I just shucked for you and slice that thinly on a bias so that it has some good plate presence and you get some of that good coloration. And just sort of strew that about. Okay, now let's talk claws. So in order to crack the claw, again, let's talk leverage. So you've got lower knuckle, the true knuckle, and then the claw here. Leverage away from each other. And all that juice, well, hey, let's drizzle that juice right on there because it's absolutely delicious. And this is the newer shell lobster. Again, going back to leverage, take this, pull it straight away, and you get that piece of cartilage that comes straight out. Newer shell lobster, you can do this.
Outside.
Outside. I'm not going to live that one down. Okay. Hey there. How are you? I got lobster all over me. All right. But despite the fact that my ceiling is now garnished with, sorry about that, honey. My ceiling is now garnished with lobster meat and juice. There you go. With the knuckles, again, leverage. Push away from the prevailing hinge, meaning the lobster knuckle goes like this naturally. So to break it, you go the opposite way. And then you can simply just push the meat out. So a great little dish like that. And one of the flavors that I really, really love with lobster is mint. And I've got some mint that just came up out of our garden here in the exuberance of spring. And I'll slice that super thin.
I think it needs another claw. You want to show us how to do that?
Do you just want me to splatter it all over myself again, Karen?
No.
Oh, this is kind and generous and wonderful to me. All right. All right, let's take another question. When that is it working on a gas or electric stove better? So again, sorry, rotate out to get that piece of cartilage. More gently crush the claw meat to get that beautiful piece of tail out. And any of this white that comes out, go ahead and use it, man. It's absolutely delicious. And I'm going to finish this dish with a little bit of really fine olive oil drizzled over top. There you go. I mean, that is a lovely, lovely dish. Serve that with some nice sourdough or crusty bread, toasted up so it's got some nice color on that. A great glass of rosé wine. Man, you're talking my language and you're making me happy. So what else am I doing here? Finding a towel. Trying to do a lot of dishes here, so we're a little bit disorganized, but we're having fun, and I hope you are as well. All right, the next question. Do frozen scallops need to be completely defrosted before cooking? Well, I think that they should be if you're trying to caramelize them or cook them in the pan, as I've done here. And the reason for that is that you're just going to have to apply too much heat to the outside in order to get the inside defrosted. So with that, and defrosting is such an easy technique. You put them on a plate and put them in the fridge with a moist paper towel over the top and just let them sit. So it's not like you're putting much effort into it. So I would do that first. But if you're doing like a bacon wrapped scallop or something that's coming to you as an hors d'oeuvre style, no, a lot of those suggest you can just cook straight from frozen. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. All right. Oh, yes. And I'm sorry. I just forgot about the gas or electric stove, Joseph. I'm sorry about that. Gas or electric. I really like gas. It's a little bit more responsive, I have found. Plus, you know what? When it's on high, I can walk across the room and see exactly what temperature it's at. I know exactly what's being transferred to the pan. It's also just what I've used my entire career, so I've got an intimacy and fluency in it. So this is what I stick with. It's what I recommend. But really what I recommend is don't think that great cooking can't happen with anything but what you've got on hand. All right? It's not the equipment. It's the cook. It's your attention to the ingredients. So you can make absolutely as good, if not better, dishes on your own home electric stove as I can here. So, all right. Let me take you to this final dish here, the Rossayat. I prepared the recipe for you with that. But as you see, as the noodles cook in the oven under the broiler, that lobster meat, that's the shucked high pressure processed lobster meat, cooks through. It sort of steams from the bottom, but then these noodles curl up like I like to say Don Johnson's hair, and on the very edges they're super soft and moist and deliciously absorbed all of that liquid. But then on the outside, they're crunchy, crispy. So you got all this wonderful texture to it, and it's a really compelling, multifaceted dish that's really pretty straightforward. Cook a lobster, use the liquid, cook some noodles, done. And I'll top this with either some aioli, which is traditional in everything in Catalan cuisine, or what I've got here is some romesco sauce. And I put maybe some more chopped fresh mint over top of that. And there you go. Here's your great dish. So those are the dishes that I've got for you today. So I know we've got a few more minutes here left and a bunch of questions. So I'm going to dive into those. But for those of you who have to leave, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate all that you do to feed your families, your neighbors, to engage with sustainable seafood. So with that, let's dive into some questions. Okay. Cyril, what's the trick for cooking scallops what is the trick for cooked scallops getting dry? Lower heat. Again, going back to that, it's a question earlier about transferring over to the toaster oven. Why I really like that is because I can control the heat, so I can get that really super crisp crust on the outside, but then that lower ambient temperature will cook them evenly throughout. The other way to do that, if you don't want to go into a toaster oven, is turn the heat down and then flip them over so you've got super low heat. So it's very slow, low transfer of heat coming up. You don't need to cook them super quick. Just cook them right. And it's all about balancing temperatures. Thanks, Cyril. Appreciate you. To toast the pasta, can it be done in a dry, heavy cast iron skillet on the stove? Bobby? Yes, absolutely it can. The key here is that I toss the crunched noodles in olive oil ahead of time. And what you're doing here is really heating the oil. And it's the oil that kind of fries the noodles more so than anything else. So it's really about heating up those oils, and that can absolutely be done in the pan on the stovetop, right in the pan that you're going to cook the final dish in. Absolutely. It just takes a little bit more focus. You got to keep tossing them and understand that once that oil gets hot, it's not going to cool down quickly. So you need to be prepared to finish the rest of the preparation right away. Hey, Bobby, thank you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your questions. All right. Denise, maybe I missed it. Did you mention cooking times for the pan-fried scallops? Thanks for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. Oh, Denise, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate you joining us. The timing on that is really, I won't say hit or miss, but it really depends on the size of the scallop. And I would say the best way to do that is to think about what you're looking to accomplish with a scallop ahead of time. Is it a deep, deep, rich caramelized crust to it with lots of flavor and all the depth of flavor? Well, if that's the case, go for it. Get that crust. And then once you've achieved that, then check to see, well, where is the scallop doneness? Is it 90% of the way through? Is it 40% of the way through? And then adjust your strategy. If it's 90% of the way through or 80%, you flip it over, turn the pan off, and let them sit for 30 seconds. If it's 40% of the way through, you turn the heat down, flip them over, and let them sit for 2 minutes. The other thing about scallops, though, is that they can be eaten raw very safely. And so cooking a scallop to medium rare, while I don't prefer it, is totally safe and fine and delicious and offers a great textural contrast between the outside and the inside. So there's not much worry about undercooking scallops. You can always throw them back on. So I like to go for a medium well doneness on them, which is going to take just a couple of minutes on the top side, on the first side you put down, and then just a few seconds on the bottom side. Hey, thanks, Denise. I appreciate you. All right, how long do you... Oh, yes. Thank you, Patrick. You're talking in my ear there. We'll show some videos about how scallops are caught when we're done here before we exit, so stick around for that. So another question from Star. How long do you smoke lobster for? Very briefly, very, very briefly. Lobster doesn't take smoke very well. Lobster flirts with smoke exceedingly well. So I think about it the way I think about perfume. Perfume should leave just a hint of lingering intrigue. It shouldn't overwhelm. If you step on the elevator with somebody wearing cologne or perfume, you should be enticed by it. You should, what is that? What got my attention? Not be like, oh my gosh. You know, who decided not to shower and wear perfume instead, right? Smoke is the same way with food. I mean, if you're barbecuing a pork butt, Yeah, Star, let it sit out there for hours and hours. That's the whole point, right? But lobster should be just scented, lightly perfumed with it. So I already had the smoker going for some pork that I am doing. I just threw it in there for 2 minutes. If you've got one of those great chef's tools, the Polyscience smoking gun, which is basically, it's an electric bong that has been repurposed as a culinary tool with a wonderful little smoking canister, which is basically this little pipe-fitted filter, and you light that, and then you turn the gun on, and it's actually a vacuum. And so it sucks air through that pipe and then pushes it out through a long tube, and you can capture that smoke in a bowl or a baking dish lined with saran wrap on top and just capture that smoke. That alone would be more than enough to scent the lobster. So thanks for your question, Star. Appreciate you. From Bill, are chicken lobsters sweeter than larger lobsters? Great question, Bill. No, they're not. There's a common, I think, what I feel is a misunderstanding about larger lobsters, and that is that they are tougher, that they're not as sweet or as flavorful. I don't find that to be true. The reason for that is that when you have a larger lobster, people tend to cook it in the exact same way that they cook smaller lobsters, which is lots of heat, boiling it quickly. But for larger lobsters, it takes longer time. And so what ends up happening is you apply super high heat for long periods of time. And that just damages the meat. It makes it tense and taut, really super elastic to the point where it can be sort of unappetizing. So if you're cooking a larger lobster, start off with that high heat. Set the meat, but then let the heat taper off and cook it at a lower, slower simmer for a longer period of time. And what you're going to end up with is a lobster that is just the same texture, just the same sweetness and tenderness that you're looking for. So there you go. Thanks, Bill. A great resource for that. We didn't share it, but Lobster Cooking Times, a chef named Jasper White, who is the godfather of New England cuisine in his restaurant Summer Shack in Boston area. Wow, is he a legend? He's got some really great books out there. And check out his websites, Summer Shack, as well as his books. So, hey, thanks. Appreciate you, Bill. All right, from BK, I've often heard that the side muscle of the scallop contains toxins. Will this piece cause any harm to us if eaten? Well, no, BK, that is as well, just as the muscle is, just pure muscle. It does not have any toxins in it. And in fact, scallops, the toxins are completely relegated. Well, they're part of the whole animal. And unlike mussels, clams, oysters, where we do eat the whole animal, scallops, we just eat that adductor muscle. So if you've ever shucked an oyster, there's that adductor muscle sitting right in the middle of it, right? And that's what attaches it to the top and the bottom shell. Same thing with a scallop. But in a scallop, that's the only part we eat. And there's some really great work being done here in Maine around scallops that you can eat the whole of the animal. And the reason why we don't eat the whole scallop animals, well, it tends to be a lot larger than an oyster or a mussel, but also because the belly and other parts of it can aggregate toxins that never make it into the mussel. Scallop mussels are always safe. But there's some great work being done around eating the whole scallop. And there's a great cookbook actually coming out that I don't have the name of it in front of me right now, but Marsden Brewer, he's a farmer up here in Maine, as well as Marnie Kroll, I believe is her last name, have written together. So please look out for that. I'll send a link out for that at some point. But no, the elbow should not be avoided, and I think included in everything. So, hey, thanks, BK. I appreciate your questions. All right, Star, a couple more questions. Thanks. What wood do you use to smoke the lobster with, and can you use a smoke gun? Well, yeah, absolutely, smoke gun. We already described that. What woods I like to use? I like nut woods, so almond, pecan particularly, and peach wood. I think peaches, just as peaches are the very best thing in all of creation, I think that peach wood, when used for smoking, is also the queen of category as svelte and magnificent as can be. I don't like hickory or cherry woods because those tend to have a lot more of the scent, the olfactory, a little bit more angular to me in terms of their scent. So I avoid those, but really any wood will work. Apple wood, of course, being sort of the standard. So, hey, thanks, Star. I appreciate you joining us today. All right, Margie, where is the ceviche recipe for scallops? It's in just under the window there. There's event document and references listed. And I believe the event document has the ceviche recipe in it. My wife is shaking her head yes. So I appreciate that. So I look forward to, I hope you enjoy that. Cheers. Thanks, Margie. Thank you very much, Barton. Much appreciated from BK. Oh, well, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate you saying so. And from Tim, last question here. Can you provide any web links for the products you've mentioned? Sure. I believe that those were listed at the outset. If they're not again, they will be up in the archive of this event, which you'll be sent a link to promptly hereafter. So please check it back in on there. But Shucks Maine Lobster, downeastdayboat.com, seabest.com, and harborfish.com. So you'll see some links for all of that. So hey, thanks all so much for joining me. There's so much we didn't cover, but please join me here and every Thursday from 11 to 12, and then from 2 to 3 East Coast time, Pacific and East Coast time. Please do me a favor, follow me on social media at Barton Seaver on Facebook and on Instagram, where I share, well, all sorts of stuff from our lives. Also, please check out some of our books. We've got compendium here. It's the more recent, The Joy of Seafood, about 1,000 recipes for, well, about 100 different species of seafood caught and landed commonly available throughout. And American Seafood, which is a history of the American seafood industry. If you ever wanted to know anything about seafood, well, chances are it's in here, and this will inspire you to know what to do with anything you come across. But hey, enough about me, enough about our products. Again, I just want to thank you for all that you do to feed others, to sustain our communities. Please look out for your neighbors, continue to love each other, wash your hands, and stay delicious. Thanks so much. I hope to see you again soon. Bon appetit.